Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Chris Hearn out of Orlando. Thank you very much for joining us, Chris.
Thank you.
We appreciate your insights and your time. I know you are very busy. Katie Roach. I got to make sure I get the last name straight. And Lance Sexton. How was your day off, Lance?
Well, Bob, I didn't realize I had a day off until last Friday, and I walked into the branch and there was a sign on the door that said our bank will be closed on Monday, and I'm like, yay! So I had a nice day off.
Hey, let's do this real quick. What are you talking about on Thursday, Lance?
We're going to talk about how to process the new short forgiveness form. We all still hope that we see additional improvements and see the dollar amount expanded, but we're going to talk about how to process the new forgiveness for those PPP loans under $50,000.
As well as over 50 as well, yeah. Hey,
Yeah,
let's
right.
Let's go to the poll questions. And we'd love to ask this question. It's slowly creeping up. We had, I think, my days are blending together, but we were at 2%, then we went to 20, then Katie, what was the last response last time we did this poll last week?
I believe it was around 40% last time we asked, but that was a couple, let's see. Yeah,
it was 41%
on the 8th.
Oh, we're still at 40%.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, Lance, I asked the question, if you have a no, should we be doing additional work? Should we be looking at coding issues? What should we do if I'm in that 45%?
Well, Chris probably is in the same boat I am, Chris, and I don't want to speak for you, but SBA has probably, who knows, 1 million or more forgiveness applications, maybe several million. So working through the process of approving forgiveness applications, it may take a few days before you see some come back to your institution. SBA certainly does not have enough staff to process the huge number of forgiveness applications. It's probably going to take a month to work through all this.
Lance, are these applications being processed in the center? Are they being processed by sequestered people at home? How do they handle IT security issues? Do you know anything on the inside of actually how this is being done at SBA's end?
And Chris might have to help me. I don't know. Most of your SBA people are, in fact, teleworking.
Right.
SBA has a long history of teleworking, so security's not an issue, Bob. When I was center director, deputy center director, we actually implemented the telework program 10 years ago at SBA. So SBA does have a lot of experience with doing things remotely. But I am not exactly sure. I suspect they're probably using employees in various centers to process this. I can't imagine just one small group.
Chris, how are you handling your internal security with telework people?
You're asking me an IT question, Bob. I don't know if I can adequately answer it. We have all the. I'm assured we have all the requisite security measures that we need. We always have, so I'm not too worried about it. We're all in the cloud, so and I've had probably close to 2/3 of my staff working from home for quite some time, so it's not been an issue for us.
The fiscal year 2020 federal government budget ended on October 31st, and were you satisfied with your numbers? Now, we will issue the Coleman Report 500 when we get the numbers. There's usually a 30-day lag, so we're probably talking, we'll get those numbers sometime in November, and we'll publish it around Thanksgiving. That shock you, Chris?
A little bit. I mean, it's kind of a interesting question in that, how do you frame it? I mean, it's the fiscal year ended September 30th, and COVID really the shutdowns from COVID really started impacting things, I'd say middle of March. So you almost have half of a year that will have impacted most of us in the lending community. So it's, are you satisfied? I mean, maybe if you're taking that into perspective, maybe you're satisfied, maybe you're not. I'm not terribly satisfied most of the time. So, but I'm not shocked by it. I mean, I guess it's how zen somebody is about their results, perhaps.
Chris, I was talking to a bank director, and one of the benefits that they received off the PPP program is the core deposits they were able to obtain, which shocked them. Lance, what was your experience, or what do you see out there on the ground?
Well, I think literally every financial institution across the country who has deposit accounts saw a rise in deposit activity as a result of PPP. Many banks, I know there was discussion about regulatory issues because you saw banks' asset total balloon during the PPP process. So they addressed that from a regulatory standpoint, but yeah, they had a lot of additional money that potentially could be lent.
The interesting thing about that, Lance, is there hasn't been that many de novo banks since the last recession, Great Recession. So there wasn't as much sort of regulatory scrutiny about these massive percentage increases in deposits, for instance, that, if there had been a couple hundred de novos, you might have seen or heard more about that.
Chris, you raised an interesting point, because during the recession, Friday night, we'd get one or two banks that were being taken over by the federales. I think we've had one bank taken over this year.
And there was only, I think it's less than 3 dozen banks that have started since the last
de novo,
yeah. So and I think mostly they've been strengthened for the most part. Now mergers and acquisitions of course increased unabatedly since for the last decade.
Yeah, but we're certainly not in a situation where where a lot of community banks, it was primarily community banks that were being closed. Right. How many deferment requests are you receiving from your borrowers? Lance, this is your question. Why are you asking this?
Well, and the reason I ask this is most of your SBA borrowers are coming off 6 CARES Act payments right now. So, the question is, how many of those people are asking for deferments at this point?
Wow.
I am not surprised at all, Bob, at these results, because there were a number of business categories that I think are struggling, that the CARES Act payment helped them to keep above water, and now the CARES Act payments are ending, and they're needing some help in making the payment.
Real quick, Lance, review, what can we do as a lender unilaterally? What's in our toolbox that we can defer payments without SBA's concurrence?
Well, you can defer up to 6 months worth of payments without, that's a unilateral action in SOP 5057-2, and we're probably going to get a new servicing SOP hopefully soon. But I don't suspect that's going to change. So, if a borrower is struggling, coming out of the CARES Act payments, you can step in. I always recommend, Bob, and you've heard me say this over and over, do a 90-day deferment, keep the other 90-day deferment in your pocket, and if they need it, when you look at the SOP 5057-2 and it talks about deferments, one of the steps it talks about is toward the end, you're supposed to monitor the small business during the deferment period to make a determination if they need additional deferment.
Chris, what percentage of your deferments, if you have any, do you at least collect something on a monthly basis?
We don't collect anything on someone who's on full deferment, but we've only got a handful of borrowers that have requested it. Interestingly enough, we've had a situation where we've had a couple borrowers who've requested deferment, and once we get updated financials, they're actually doing quite well. And we've actually said, no, sorry, you're not in a position yet where you would qualify for a deferment. I think I would urge everybody to be a little careful about that, because I think there's going to be more and more of that. It's kind of like the discussion point about PPP. There's still some debate about, did everybody who got a PPP loan need a PPP loan? Now, the sense of the Senate was that everybody got affected, sure. That's sort of the overarching argument. But there were some firms that have done fine and probably could have done fine without a PPP loan, just like there's probably some firms right now, and I've seen a handful of ours, who, they like to take advantage of the situation if they can. And I don't blame them, but they've got to have a rational reason for doing so.
Yeah. Chris makes an excellent point, Bob. There are a lot of people setting out, reading the headlines and seeing what's going on that are doing quite well, who will submit for a deferment request. I always tell participant banks, use those deferment requests with good judgment. You need to collect financial information. You need to verify that they have a cash flow hardship, because a deferment's supposed to be a temporary solution to a temporary problem.
Yep, that's right.
Very good. Katie, you're awfully quiet. And maybe you want to remain quiet, because I'm going to ask you the question. Where are we on stimulus negotiations in Congress and administration in Washington, D.C.?
Well, there's not unfortunately, there's not a lot of news. We're still in the negotiation process, and that's been the case for several weeks now. On Sunday, the White House Chief of Staff and Treasury Secretary sent a letter to Congress noting that they want to redirect the remaining amount of PPP funds into a stimulus package, which would include a second drop PPP, but also some other things as well. Both Pelosi and Trump have been indicating in the past couple of days that they would really prefer to pass a larger, bigger package that would be involving multiple issues rather than doing smaller standalone bills that are separate. So that it looks like they are still pushing for that, but there's not really any movement yet on new bill or anything like that.
But the good news is that the back channels are talking, correct?
Right, they are.
Chris, can you shed any light on this?
I'm hearing that McConnell and his staff are still discussing this, and it's going to be tough to get this done while they're also doing the confirmation hearings on the proposed new justice. But they're willing to do it. They've only got a couple weeks before they all leave for recess officially before the election. I think McConnell is interested perhaps in bringing forth the separate bills, but of course Speaker Pelosi doesn't want to do that. She wants to, the typical, what's known as Christmas treeing the pieces of legislation, add more stuff together, make it more difficult for somebody to dislike and vote against the legislation. So, but the president seems to be very eager to get something done, and I think that's a positive. I think there's definitely a lot of messaging in the media about how it's a bit of a dereliction of duty if they don't. It's going to be a very hard holiday season, winter coming up, if they don't get something done quickly. I think they've delayed and stalled about as long as and painfully and torturously as any of us would have wanted to see. And I think they're starting to hear a lot from their constituents that something is better than nothing. So I'm still hopeful something gets done here shortly.
Very good. Back to the secondary market, a couple questions. Lance, if you sell the loan, you need investor approval for a 6-month deferment from the investor, correct?
Correct.
You can do a 90-day deferral on a loan sold in the secondary market unilaterally, but anything beyond a 90-day deferral requires submitting to Coleman for investor approval.
Right.
What is the investor appetite to approve these types of requests?
Bob, I used to think it was not very strong, but my understanding, what helped me most, Bob, is participating last year in the secondary market summit and talking to some of the people that are involved, and they said, yeah, we do want to work with borrowers. I think in this current environment, the investors probably would be inclined to be supportive. But Bob, you have an option. If the investor says no, you can move for an emergency repurchase by SBA. And go ahead and move forward after SBA buys it back with that deferment.
Very good. And I love this name, and I apologize for mispronouncing it, but it's Lavinia, maybe Lavinia, but she asked the same question, 3 months unilateral, but we can divert up to 6 months with investor approval.
That's right.
Very good. Katie, we got some interesting stats. Tell us about them.
Sure. So I went through the 7A and 504 approval data this morning and kind of looked at comparing both of them and how they did year over year. So this year, I think we have a slide for almost all of the major things that they break it down into. For startup loans, 7A was about 14% of the total funds. Oh, and we're going to flip forward, I guess. Let's see. Let me see if I can pull up the other one. Oh, fast. Okay. For startup, 7A was 14%. 504 was also about 14% of those programs each individually. Change of ownership is 7A was 25% of the amount total, and 504 was 2%. Which I found interesting because that's been a growing topic, especially in SBA, just reading about, we have an aging population. We all know that. So you're starting to see people pass down their businesses and things like that. So seeing 25% of that be a 7A is pretty impressive, and I would expect that to grow. As far as minorities go, 7A was about 28%. And 504 is 23%. So both of those are fairly large for, but that is including all minorities. Breaking that down a little bit, female-owned businesses, this is both above 50% owners and below 50% owners, just being partially owned by female owner. 7A is 25%, 504 is 28%.
It's interesting, Katie, talking to some of the district directors here in Southern California. One of their greatest areas of growth, and I apologize, we don't have year to year, but are Hispanic women-owned businesses, and they're doing very well. Chris, are you seeing that as well?
I am. I admit I don't dive into these details very often. I'm just trying to help as many people as we can. But I'm a little surprised that the female ownership is only around a quarter. I would have thought that would have been higher. Just my observation. I'm also a little surprised that the change of ownership for 504 is as high as it is at 2%.
That's right, that 2%. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was shocked that 25% of all 7A is change of ownership. I would have gotten that wrong. I thought it would have been less, and I thought 504 would have been greater.
Well, I think the trend is certainly accelerating, as Katie was saying.
If you're a stat geek, these stats are all on SBA. What's the website, Katie? Oh.
I had to specifically look for them listed under approval report. For some reason, when I went to their regular stats page, it wasn't coming up. So you can just Google search SBA 7A 504 approval report, and it'll give you a list of several weeks, and you can pick the closest week. This one is at the, of course, at the end of the fiscal year.
Very good. Lance talked about our upcoming webinars. Again, please get your nominations. And Joseph, hop on. How many nominations have we received for the professional awards?
We received a bunch over the weekend, and they're still coming in. So I think we're close to 10 now. So
yeah.
Send them in.
So please nominate your staff. We'll go through the end of October, first week of November somewhere is the cutoff date for that. And Chris, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Lance, as always, look forward to your webinar coming up Thursday. Hopefully we have a little bit more information tomorrow, but thank you for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a great day.
Have a great afternoon.